Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for coming and joining us here today. And as I always mention, please silence your cell phones so we can avoid the usual interruptions. My name is Muhammad. I'm the executive director here at the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center. And on behalf of our board of directors and our staff, it's a pleasure to welcome you here today. And it's, of course, a pleasure to welcome our online audience, whoever's watching online. It's also a great honor to introduce our distinguished speakers today. We have Sir Rateb Rabie, Father Drew Christiansen, and Dr. Carole Monica Burnett. Why do Christians claim Jerusalem as a spiritual home? Why are we all in our own way sworn to protect and serve Jerusalem's promise by preserving it for Christians everywhere? What is the impact of President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel and to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem on the status quo and peace of Jerusalem? Why must the three Abrahamic faiths of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, as well as the Palestinians and Israelis, share Jerusalem? These answers are found in the book, What Jerusalem Means to Us. In today's lecture, you will hear from three of the contributors to this timely and unique volume of 23 essays by Palestinian and other Christians of various cultural, ethnic, and national backgrounds. Their contributions, authentic, heartfelt, wise, faithfully address the Christian stake in Jerusalem as well as the universal meaning of Jerusalem. What becomes evident is that Jerusalem belongs to humanity in general, to all those who aspire, seek, and pursue a higher calling in its hallowed ground, and it should remain as such for eternity. Copies of the book will be available for purchase after the event, and I'm sure our authors here would love to sign them for you. So just a background, brief biography of our speakers. We have in the middle, Jesuit Father Drew Christiansen is the Distinguished Professor of Ethics and Global Human Development at Georgetown University and a Senior Research Fellow at the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. He is a canon of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem and a co-founder of the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation and a member of its advisory board. On the to my far right is Dr. Carole Monica Burnett, who is the editor of the Fathers of the Church series, an expanding collection of early Christian texts translated from Greek, Latin, and Syriac, published by the Catholic University of America Press. She has taught church history at the Ecumenical Institute of Theology at St. Mary's Seminary and University in Baltimore, as well as Greek and Latin at the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. Her spiritual home is the Antiochian Orthodox Church. To my right is Sir Rateb Rabie, KCHS, who is the founder, president, and CEO of the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation, or HCEF. He was born in Amman, Jordan, to Palestinian parents, and he is co-founder and past national president of the Bir Zayed Society, and co-founder, vice president, and treasurer of the Institute for Health, Development, and Research in Palestine. He is also a Knight Commander of the Equestrian Order of Holy Sepulchre and a fourth-degree Knight of Columbus, founder and co-chair of the Holy Land Outreach Committee of the Knights of Columbus, Maryland State Council. He is recipient of the Faith and Tolerance Award from the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee. Sir Rateb is committed to improving the living conditions for Palestinian Christians in their homeland, preserving Palestine's Christian heritage, and strengthening the identity of Palestinian Christians in the worldwide diaspora. And so we have a knight within our presence here. Our speakers will speak for about 45 minutes, after which we will have a...
Surprise for us.
And after they finish their 45 minutes each, we will have a Q&A session. We asked, as always, that you wait for the mic to come to you so that everybody online can hear as well. And the online audience, as always, you can tweet your questions to @Palestine Center. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sir Rateb Rabie, Father Drew Christiansen, and Dr. Monica Burnett.
Good afternoon. I just want to make things clear. I'm a contributor to this book, but I'm not the intellectual like these two people, okay? I just put the things together. This book is very important that we put it together as the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation because of what's happening in Jerusalem. Already we've been fighting for Jerusalem for what's happening in Jerusalem. Forget about Trump, forget about the embassy. We've been struggling. Jerusalem is in danger. And what's happening in Jerusalem we're working on. The Israelis have three things they are doing to Jerusalem in order to change the identity of Jerusalem. You know, they are doing little to improve Jerusalem, especially I'm talking about East Jerusalem. They are the development of the city by building the wall around it. This is the phase one. Second thing is that's what they are doing. I want to call it Israelization of Jerusalem, because you go there every time you visit Jerusalem, you see more and more it is losing its identity as Christian and as a Muslim, as Palestinian, as international city for everyone should be there. And the third thing is what they are trying to do is gentrification of the city. They are trying to kick the Palestinian out, bring more Jewish in, then becomes more a Jewish city rather than to be a Palestinian city. When I talk as Christian, I don't want to say it is a Christian city. Even I should say that if I think like them, because the only prophet was there is Jesus Christ. That's mean we should be a Christian city. But no, in Christianity we like to share it. We say it's for all. But this is where we have to think about it, because it is a spiritual city, for everyone. And the story of the book is struggling, when they decided that Trump to move the embassy to Jerusalem. It is shocking, because we cannot, first as a Palestinian, the British gave Palestine to the Jewish. Then now Trump again, he gives the city to them. It's like he owns it. This is the idea of this book, is how we can, Christians, claim the city as a city for all. Well, I'm not saying for Christians. This is why I want to emphasize on that. It is for all of us. And we've been living there for a long time. My parents, they were living in the city in 1948 when they were kicked out. That's mean I heard the stories. I'm a son of refugees when they were kicked out to Jordan. And this is where I was born. And that where I'm saying here, that is the city should be for all. We should, as Christian, not to be silent, because we are silent. And this is why they take advantages of it, and we should speak out. And I'm saying, let's have another announcement. Let's have another embassy for the Palestinian in East Jerusalem. Then we will be all fine. But don't involve in politics, and I don't involve in theology. But I involve in the human rights issues, where we should all think about it as our city. If we all think about like that, then we have peace. And this is where it's changing with this order. When decided to move the embassy, the status quo is gone. Now they are changing things that shouldn't be changed, because nobody will accept it. And as you see, the whole world is against that. You have few countries, because for economical basis, they are following the United States, and it's unfair. And you talk to a lot of people, they say this is not the right things to do. And the book, I have 23 leaders, and Christian religious leaders, they are wrote in this book. It is a nice articles. It is easy to read, nicely put together, and this is done by our editor Dr. Saliba Sarsar, who is in charge of HCF Publication and Research Committee, which that he looked into it, and he's from Jerusalem, and he put his heart into this book. Then, and we published this book as fast as we could, and even, when you have to deal with all these people, it is challenging, because, they are all over, they are in the Holy Land, in Europe and here, and to ask each one of them, and that was a hard job for me, just to make sure that they will contribute. Some of others we asked, they couldn't make it within, the 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we gave them that time, in order to put the book together. And when all these articles came together, we looked at them and we found out that they have 3 things, into this book. One is the Theological Meditation. This is some of the writers like Father Drew, like David Ranick from the Presbyterian Church. You can see the depth of it, about what is Jerusalem. And he will talk about it in a little bit. The second one was really a personal views on the Bible to national and political reflections. This is something where I wrote about it. The whole idea of the organization HCF came from Jerusalem. I got a call there. I don't know. I was in the Holy Sepulchre and somebody was talking to me. Who? I don't know. You just look around and somebody talked to you. Did you need to do something about that? And this is how I moved. I decided to start something for the Christians in the Holy Land. Doesn't mean I'm just for the Christians. I'm for all Palestinians. Because this is what is our faith regardless. If you don't do that, that means you are not Christian. And this is where I thought this is our entrance to the world, to listen to us. As a Palestinian activist, nobody was listening to us. The last things I did as only Palestinian activist is commemorating the 50 years of al-Nakba for 1 full year with all the Arab organizations, and we failed. Failed in getting the message out. I thought there should be another way to do it, is to go through the churches and ask them to help us and to let them know the truth, because this is not our responsibilities as Palestinian Christians to save the faith. It is your responsibilities as Christians to save our faith and to save our roots, because this is your home as anybody else. And this is where we started and we moved forward on this. This is one thing. The other thing is managed to get the endorsement of the main head of churches in Palestine, the Latin, the Orthodox, and the Lutherans, because that's very important too, that we are all together, for Jerusalem, and can't be for one faith, has to be for all faiths. And this is what is the book all about, that we are doing that. We are not going to stop here too. What we're going to do now, we are working on what Jerusalem means to us, Muslim perspective and reflections. And this is the next one. And the third one about the Jewish too, who are believes in sharing Jerusalem and all of that, because we need to hear it all as in one document, 3 books, put them together in order to let the world know that we all want Jerusalem to all of us. We are not prejudiced. We are not against anybody. We don't discriminate anybody. And this is the message we have to do, because when we say Jerusalem is the city of peace, how we can be city of peace and we are all fighting for it for our own selves, and this is not acceptable. And this is where the book, if really wants to know the opinion of the Christians, it is in the book. The book is not for commercial when we made it. We need this to use it as tools. Tools for schools, seminaries, wherever, there are people interested in Jerusalem to know what are the views of the Christians for now. And this could change the way things happening in Jerusalem, and we need to speak out as Christians, not as politicians or anything else, because when you speak And this is where I just came back from Boston. I spoke at the Boston College and and the high school now. They are interested to know, even they are young, but they need to start with them in order to figure out how we can make everybody aware of the situation. Not as just Jerusalem claimed to be by the Israelis, and to be claimed, and if you talk about it, you are anti-Semite. And the good thing, we are the Palestinians, we are Semites too, and always I cannot be anti myself. And this is where I am fighting for sharing Jerusalem, and where everybody should think about it that way. I'm going to give up my other 30 minutes, and I'll let Father Drew to speak. Thank you very much.
If you don't mind, I will speak here from my place. I want to thank Mohammed for his hospitality. It's always good to be back here at the Palestine Center. And thank Rateb for organizing the book, for finding a publisher for it, and inviting me to be part of it. This is especially important because it's the 20th anniversary of the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation, so this is a special kind of undertaking. I hope you'll be able to participate in our celebration of that 20th anniversary this coming October. For those of you who are of a certain age, as a retired editor, I want to point out that the print of this book is large, and the leading, that is the space between the lines, is wide, so it's much easier to read, especially when you're getting sleepy. It'll keep your eyes will be able to relax on it. You don't have to squint to kind of look at the print as you often do. It's really for an audience at my age and older. It's a help to kind of read it that way. I want to talk first about my own piece, and kind of set it as something that I think we all share, and that is that as much as we want to act, we've been stymied by our failures in the past. We admire people like Rateb for never giving up and finding new ways to kind of express his commitment to the people of the Holy Land and to build solidarity around that cause. Maureen may remember when we had the appeal from the Churches of Middle East Peace back in 1994. I guess it was 95 when we finally realized for United Jerusalem, and that was a response to the American church leaders to request of the heads of churches in Jerusalem to take a position on Jerusalem, and we eventually designed a campaign that was very widely broadcast and well received, but also received a lot of hostility because, again, it was making challenges to an exclusivist claim to Jerusalem. Our claim still is, our calling is still that Jerusalem is a city for all. As Pope John Paul II described it, it's a place of encounter with God for all humanity. Through the three monotheistic faiths, the whole of the human family encounters God, and therefore the place where that happens, Jerusalem, is sacred to humanity as well as to the people of those three faiths. I want to come back to that a little later, but that really was the core of the appeal of the patriarchs and heads of churches, and the appeal that we're going to make today. I chose a meditation as a format because of this experience of constant effort, and only whenever they were victories, they were partial victories, and mostly setbacks, especially in recent years, with respect to Jerusalem. And I took the biblical format of lament as the place where I would reflect, because lament really kind of expresses a built-up reservoir of energy, of disappointment, of regret, of frustration, and you just let it all out to God and say, I'm afflicted. Because we all know lament from Jeremiah and the book of Lamentations, but you find it elsewhere in the Hebrew scriptures as well, particularly at the end of Tobit, which is the lament that I use as kind of my text in this book. Lament kind of enables you to name that suffering, but also name your expectations and your hopes that have been dashed. And it also invites God to renew you with courage and hope. And I think that's the important part of being able to say that kind of prayer. Until you can cleanse yourself of those negative feelings of loss and of hostility that arises from that loss, of repeated pain and repeated obstacles, until you can kind of put them aside, you can't really be committed to making it a city, making Jerusalem a city for humanity. And we're reminded too that Jesus himself wept over Jerusalem. When he approaches the city, he goes to what above the Mount of Olives, and now we have today the shrine of Dominus Flevit commemorating that event, where he cried because Jerusalem had missed its moment of peace. That is, its opportunity to recognize him as the bearer of God's message. And he was longing that would happen. And it didn't happen for him. And so we share with him that lament as well as sharing with one another. The other side of the lament, of course, is the movement to hope. To hope that Jerusalem will become a city for all. I'm very much inspired by the vision of the mountain of Mount Zion in Isaiah, where he says, all nations will come here and worship. And then there's the wonderful, if you haven't read it recently, go back and read the wonderful Psalm 87, which people come from Assyria, they come from Ethiopia, they come from around the then known world and say, this is our home, this is where we were born. And it seems to me that psalm more than any kind of expresses the desire for Jerusalem to be a city of universal peace. Let me just say a bit about how this relates to the current situation. It seems to me that what we have in the prophetic tradition, at least in some of the Psalms, particularly Psalm 87, but elsewhere as well, is a hope for a city that will really opens its doors to everyone. And under Israeli control, we've had difficulties opening the shrines to all people, especially Palestinians from the West Bank, but people from Arab countries as well. They've been refused admission to the places that are holy to them. But it's more too a sense that the Zionist claims for Jerusalem are deliberately exclusivist. The historical reasons for that may be plain, but they also emphasize a certain hardness that needs to be overcome by welcoming, generous hearts. There's a sense that other people have to be excluded for it to belong to Israelis, and that's not the case. It can be shared. It can be a shared city. Our appeal in '95 was for a shared Jerusalem, and I think that's still the expectation, a hope, that Jerusalem will be able to be shared by Christians, Muslims, and Jews, because the city is sacred to all. I think that there are some events coming up in the coming year that can be of help. I think in the high-level meeting following at the end of the General Assembly this year will be on migrants and refugees. And I think that there ought to be occasion there to talk about the need of the right of return of Palestinians to their homeland, particularly the right to enter into Jerusalem. I think also that those of us who are concerned about the fate of Palestinians need to be very concerned about the refunding of UNRWA, the release of the funds already allocated, but the resumption of the large amounts that the U.S. used to give. The Trump administration reduced that amount considerably, by more than $100 million, and then withheld $65 million out of pique when Palestinian spokespeople condemned the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem. But most of all, it seems to me that what we have to do is to hand over our frustration to the Lord in that spirit of lament, so that we'll be free to act in new ways, as Rateb continues to do, to work for Jerusalem as a city that represents universal peace. Thank you all.
My chapter in the book is going to appear to you as different from what I'm about to say. In other words, I'm not going to stick with what I have written. Partly because if I did stick with what I've written, you wouldn't want to read the book. Because you'd say, oh, been there, done that. But both my chapter and what I'm saying today could have a title, Confessions of a Reformed Religious Romanticist. Now, being a religious romantic is not a bad thing, but it can be taken much too far. To speak about my mentality before, say, 2005, 2006, I would say that I was in a long line of Western pilgrims who would come to the Holy Land and engage in prayer and worship, and it was so special to them to be in the very same place where Jesus had been. Because as Christians, we believe that God became incarnate and walked this earth. God is not a detached God. He came here to be with us and to feel what we feel as humans. And so we know that when you come to earth, you have to come to a specific spot. You can't just come to the whole earth all at once. So to touch that spot is a very special experience. And when you grow up with the Bible, those biblical narratives become part of your own personal identity. It's who I am, identifying with this panoply of characters and events. So I would have to say, a typical pilgrim. Now, as far as Western pilgrims coming to Jerusalem and the Holy Land in general, you probably know that this stream of pilgrims started with the reign of the Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena, who visited the Holy Land, and the construction of churches at places where it was decided that specific things had happened. The earliest record that we have of one of these pilgrimages comes from the year 333, when the Emperor Constantine was still alive, and that's the Pilgrim of Bordeaux in France. And he left behind some records, they're sort of dry to read, but of where he had been and what is located where. And then you probably have heard of Egeria, who it is thought was probably from northern Spain and was a nun, came and left detailed descriptions of her prayer and worship experiences. Then there's feisty old St. Jerome, who came towards the end of the 4th century and settled down. He wrote letters back to his friends in Rome, pleading with them to come and join him in the Holy Land. He had gone with 2 of his women friends, Paula and Eustochium, but he wanted to be joined by more of his women friends. And so he wrote these letters. One of them is particularly moving to me, I think. He's writing it to Marcella. This is letter number 46, saying, please come, please come, please come. And he says, when you come, we will go to the Holy Sepulchre, and we will weep with the Blessed Mother Mary. We will go to the tomb of Lazarus, and we will see him emerge in his grave clothes. We will go to the Mount of Olives, and our spirits will rise in prayer as we see the Lord ascending. It's very beautiful. And what he is saying there is that if you come to the exact spot where things happened, you can re-experience it. It will happen again for you. It will not just be something written on the page of the Bible. So I really identified with that. And also, there have been many other pilgrims that have left behind descriptions. A couple of them have said that your religious education is not complete unless you come here. Today we just say it's the fifth gospel. The Holy Land is the fifth gospel. But I would have to say that the most lyrical and eloquent, poetic expression of delight in the holy places came not from a Westerner. This is just my taste, my opinion. It came from someone who was born in Damascus, who joined the monastery of St. Theodosius, which is near Bethlehem. You can still go there, by the way, and spent time in Alexandria, Egypt, traveled around the Eastern Mediterranean with a friend named John Moskos, and you may have guessed, or you may not, his name was Sophronius. He was the patriarch of Jerusalem at the time when the Caliph Omar arrived with his Muslim contingent. So he oversaw the transfer of Jerusalem into Muslim hands, which actually went quite smoothly. But that is Saint Sophronius. Now, he wrote these poems when he was away from Jerusalem. And let me just read a section to you. Sophronius writes, "Holy city of God, Jerusalem, how I long to stand even now at your gates and go in rejoicing. Let me walk thy pavements and go inside the Anastasis, the Church of the Resurrection, it is, where the King of all rose again, trampling down the power of death. Through the divine sanctuary, I will penetrate the divine tomb, and with deep reverence will venerate the rock, and prostrate I will venerate the navel point of the earth, that divine rock in which was fixed the wood which undid the curse of the tree. How great thy glory, noble rock, in which was fixed the cross, the redemption of mankind. Exultant, let me go into the place where all of us who belong to the people of God venerate the glorious wood of the cross." Now, where did that attitude leave me? I was starry-eyed. I've got to confess to you, I was. Okay. But being starry-eyed can only take you so far. In 2005, I stood with my oldest son on a street in Jerusalem just outside the new gate of the old city. And across the street, I saw a humble-looking man dressed in poor clothing who was walking along the sidewalk, not carrying anything, just strolling slowly, not doing anything suspicious at all, and two IDF soldiers descended upon him. One of them trained a gun on him, and the other searched him. I said to my son, "Why?" And he said, "That's what happens around here." Now, as Americans, This is outrageous. There's no way we would tolerate anything like that. That was the seminal incident that sparked my investigation of the Holy Land today. And being concerned to stay with Christian sources, I first read Elias Shakur's book. Okay. Actually, his first two books. And I saw what the Nakba was all about. I had not realized, having grown up with Paul Newman's beautiful blue eyes in the movie Exodus, I had no idea. But Archbishop Elias Shakur lays it all out through a Christian lens, but not trying to dull the pain of what he suffered as a child and as an adult. Subsequently, I did some traveling with some Sabeel groups, and I investigated settlements, the wall, the checkpoints in the wall, and the flying checkpoints, which are totally unpredictable, and my own mobility in the Holy Land was interfered with by the Israeli apartheid system. And so I was beginning to get a feel for what's going on today. Then I thought, well, how can this be the Holy Land? How can this be a holy city? And I realized that we've got to act. If we don't act, we're going to have to start calling it the unholy city, to be honest human beings. So I look back at Jerome, his letter to Marcella, and apparently Marcella has said she doesn't want to come to Jerusalem, she says, because it's not really holy. The holy city is in the book of Revelation, the holy city that descends from heaven in the vision of St. John. And she says, that's the one I'm waiting for. Apparently she has written to him earlier, and now he's responding to her objections. And he says, well, he goes on about the good behavior of people in Jerusalem in his time. I would not have responded that way, but here's how I would respond to Marcella. I would say that if you consign today's Jerusalem to cruelty, injustice, and oppression and suffering, if you say, well, this is just the way it has to be, I give up. What are you? You are engaging in a Christian heresy called dualism, which says that this earth is corrupt and sinful, and that only the heavenly powers can bring us out of it, that there are good forces and evil forces at war with each other, and we're kind of helpless. And so I think, I'm not saying Marcella was a dualist, but I'm saying we should not be dualists. We should not sit back and say, well, there's a war in heaven, there's some kind of metaphysical combat between good and evil going on here. We have to stand up. If we don't, we're on the side of evil. That's the way it is. So, what can we do? Well, for one thing, we should never shut up, ever. We should write letters to editors of papers, magazines, church newsletters, you name it, anything that comes out in print or online, respond. Tell people what's going on, because Americans don't know. Yeah. Also, there's writing to legislators, too, attending events and rallies and so forth. But I want particularly to talk about this business of writing to editors. Because if editors don't receive letters, they won't know what their readership is thinking. They might think, oh, you love to read these articles about how terrible Hamas is and how saintly the Israeli army is. They might think that you're eating all that up if you don't speak out. And so I have actually, and I did not mention this in my chapter at all, I didn't even allude to it, but I have a media monitoring service called Right Alert. It's not affiliated with any organization. It's just some other people and me as friends who got together and we monitor the newspapers in the United States. When there is an op-ed or an incredibly biased feature article, we send out an alert to our subscribers, and it's free. It's a free service. Nobody pays anything. There's no obligation. But we send an alert with suggested talking points and how to write to the editor of that particular publication. Likewise, if there's an op-ed that we want to applaud and to support, we also send out an alert. To subscribe, you send an email to Write Alert, that's WRITEALERT, at outlook.com. No obligation whatsoever. If you don't write the letter to the editor, I'll never know. But at least it's a little heads up that here's a place where you can speak out. It's a notification of an opportunity. As Americans, as Christians, we cannot let the holy city be so unholy. We are the light of the world, and we've got to let that light shine. Amen.
Amen.
One for Dr. Rateb. Is it true that the American consulate, now new embassy, is actually located in East Jerusalem on what is traditionally West Bank or Palestinian land?
It is on the no man land, actually. It's not in the East Jerusalem yet. It is where the American consulate of the Israeli side now. I mean, there is still hope if we make another decision now, saying we have another embassy in the East Jerusalem, then the whole thing will resolve by itself.
So I have a question really for all three of you. What's your experience with when you talk to some of the more Zionist Christians in the U.S.? How do they react when you tell them about what's going on there and how Christians are being oppressed in Jerusalem and really throughout Palestine? What kind of reaction do you get, and are more of them becoming aware of the truth, or what's going on there?
I just, again, it's not from the theological point of view or the intellectual point of view. From what I see, that even with moving the embassy, there are some evangelicals are not happy with that. Oh. Yes, because it is not, cannot have the state of Israel. Still, the people who are really in the Judaism, they feel shouldn't be a political capital for the Jewish people. And some of them are not for that, even they are the one who are for Israel. I don't want to get into the evangelicals' point of view, because, but the way they look at it is that it should be, they like, the Zionist Christian, they like Israel because they want to bring the second coming of Israel, of Jesus, and this is where, they are looking at it. If, like what she said, if we keep bringing up the alerts, the articles are written and things like that, this is what we need to do to defend what the Israelis are saying. And even some Jewish, they said, I'm happy with what, Trump said, moving the embassy to Jerusalem for the capital of Israel, but not for the Jewish people. If we, as Christian, not Zionists, we build on that, could change the things that we are the one talking of. I don't know, I want to try to be politically correct, in the way it's happening, that we should separate the capital involving the politics with our religion. Because still we have, with a lot of meeting some of these Christians, when they see that you are supporting, how you support the state of Israel, how you support something like that where we are, their followers are not recognizing that Jesus came. That means, where is our Christianity? And from the theological point of view, maybe there are explanations. For me, as just Christians and Palestinian Christians, I feel that should be questioned and see how that we have to look at it, and how the evangelicals or the Zionist Christian should be educated, which is very hard because I need theologians, and we are, at least the Catholics, at least myself, I didn't have the chance to read the Bible when I was going to school. To defend all of that, I have to come on later stage to read and to find out the things where can defend our rights in the Bible. It's like when I find out in Act 2, 11, that the Arabs were there. Oh, we are the original Christians, I mean, Pentecost yesterday was, all of that. It was, for me, wow, we are the holy people, That's something, we need to let the world know that we are not converts, we are the original, and people should listen to the Palestinian Christians as they are, the original Christian, the holy people.
We Catholics like to say we're a big church. There are limits, but it's a big tent church with a lot of different people. The Jewish rabbis say, the two rabbis, the three opinions, and evangelicals also represent a wide range of opinions. I think it's better to talk about the Christian Zionists because the evangelicals are a much larger body, but they're very loosely associated, so that that Hagee and Jeffries don't represent anyone but themselves, really. And the whole politicization of evangelical churches has been a worry to many evangelicals. And yet some evangelicals have really taken a very positive position. You have Evangelicals Middle East Understanding, which is sympathetic to Palestinian causes. You also have Kairos USA, which is kind of response to Kairos Palestine, which originated with an American Jew, at least the contact I had with it, but actually is appealing to and working with many American evangelicals who are not Christian Zionists, and working explicitly to counter Christian Zionism. So I think if we need to, not to be politically correct, but to be just accurate, you need to say Christian Zionists, and how to respond there.
In my conversations with people, now not in my own church, because the Antiochian Orthodox Church has many Arabs in it, but just in general, outside of my church, just people I meet, somebody I might meet in a doctor's waiting room, and so forth, or on a bus, whatever. I find an appalling lack of knowledge. People don't know the geography of the region. They think Bethlehem is inside Israel, or they think it's all Israel. They think that they may have heard of the 67 war, but they think that because Israel conquered certain lands in 1967, those lands are now Israel. So it's all Israel. That's what they think. And of course, Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists love to hear that. They're not going to dispute that. So I think information is important, needs to be taught in the schools, basic geography and history. But unfortunately, it's so controversial that there are some instructors, professors, high school teachers who are worried about dealing with that subject. It's got to be done, and it's got to be done on the basis of solid fact. As far as the Christian Zionists go, I don't know what Nikki Haley's religious views are, but she seems to be in sync with Mike Pence, I think. And unfortunately, I think Nikki Haley is a powerful opinion maker. She gained the public's respect when she did the right thing and took the Confederate flag down from the South Carolina State House. So her pronouncements in the UN are, I'm sure they carry weight with a lot of the public. I mean, I don't have evidence to tell you that. Maybe James Ogby could tell us whether that's true or not. He'll be here tomorrow, is it? Yeah. God bless him. Good. But she's a physically attractive lady who has gained the respect of the public from her past actions. And yet she blames, excuse me, she blames everything on Hamas. And of course, Israel is only defending itself. And I think, I don't know to whom we can write letters, but if there are articles about Nikki Haley, and if you subscribe to Right Alert, you're going to get an alert from me.
A follow-up question to that question. A few days ago, we had another panel with a Christian speaker who was asked the question, why isn't there more support from the American mainstream Christians, Catholics, Protestants, for the religious Christians in Jerusalem? And his answer was that he felt that the mainstream Christians here don't see the Christians in Palestine as Christians. There's some sort of weird offshoot, and they're associated with whatever, Arabs, who knows. But they're not quite right. And that is one of the reasons that it is harder for the religious in Palestine to get really major support. And that's obviously not true from all denominations of the American Christian community, but there hasn't been a huge outcrying for brother Christians, sister Christians. Can you address that in some way? I mean, it was the first time I'd heard that comment.
Don't look at me.
Okay. Well, part of it is what narratives the press is willing to run. Having been an editor myself, I recognize the control that editors have. Charlie Sennett is a great journalist from Boston. Was the Boston Globe correspondent from Jerusalem, and then the Middle East correspondent, and then headed the whole all of Europe out of London for a while. And he wrote a book at the time of the Great Jubilee in 2000, The Body and the Blood, which is an excellent book about the Christians of the Near East, and following the route of John Moskos, actually. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling him, I thought, this article just doesn't read like what we were telling you. And he said, no, my editors would not allow me to publish it that way. The editors had the tapes in their heads that the Jewish defense organizations were putting there. And it had to make that mold for him to get what reporting he was doing out. And I think that sadly is the case, is that the editors, whether they be broadcast editors or print editors, have a certain way to, and so there can be a lot going on, and it's just not covered. Steve Kolecki just retired from the Bishops' Conference, head of the Office of International Justice and Peace. And although we had one director who came between us, he really carried the standard for the Middle East and the Holy Land the way I did in my time, and did many very, very good things, not only for that office, but for the Bishops' Conference. But you never hear about it. And one problem I know is that there are problems among high-ranking Catholics. I don't mean the hierarchy, but I mean lay people. Right now, Jeff Aboud, who's with the Midwestern Lieutenancy, the Untitled Chapter, does an annual report on developments. But he really, his job is to educate the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre what's going on, so they can turn, can act from whatever, whether it's pilgrims or as leading people in their communities. But in the past, there were episodic attempts to have that kind of position activated nationwide. For a while, 3 or 4 years, they had their own lobbyist here in town on these issues. But the New York Lieutenancy, with a lot of money, a lot of attachment to the local Jewish community, killed that particular effort. And so they didn't have their office here anymore. And so they couldn't be as vocal or as effective. And I'm afraid that we're not wily enough when it comes to dealing with that kind of pressure. But you have to stand up to it, you really do. And so Right Alert is a very important kind of contribution, I think, that needs to be replicated in many different ways to be able to have to activate responses from the grassroots level and on the political level. It's very important to explain to veteran politicians, it seems to me, what the issues are. Of course, they finally have some independence because of their service and tenure, because of the actual services they deliver to their districts and their states. You can't get newer ones to do it seems to me. But you can perhaps get older ones to come around in their thinking because they've been there longer and will respond. But this is still a hot potato for members of Congress and the Senate. We used to say when I was working with Bishops' Conference of Churches of Middle East Peace that the Congress was occupied territory. And if you wanted to get anything done, you work with the State Department and the National Security Council. Right now, I think that's an out too. So I think we have to go through the media, and that has to be the way in which progress is made.
Dr. Monica, just so Right Alert, is it a website or just the email?
There's a Facebook page,
Okay.
and you search capital W, all in caps, Right, W-R-I-T-E, space, capital A, then lowercase L-E-R-T. Right Alert is on Facebook. But actually, if you want to communicate with me, it's all lowercase, Right Alert at outlook.com.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll share that with people that we know.
That would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Of course. Is there
Yes,
any?
I want
Yes.
to add something about how they look at us. I came to this country in 1975, 76. Anyway, somehow my parents sent me to South Carolina to learn English. If you notice my southern accent, I was there, and they assigned a host family for me and my roommate, which is Muslim from Syria, and they want to know what's our religion. I said, I'm Christian. And what I mean, I'm Christian because we don't have the luxury to say Protestant, Catholic, or Orthodox over there. And they said, no, we need to know what's your denomination. I said, I'm Catholic. God help. I never seen them again. They lost hope with me, but they kept seeing my friend, the Muslim one, because there is hope that he could be a Christian.
Yes.
I mean, if you are talking about, why and what, still here being a Catholic, you are discriminated too by them. It is, imagine that. And this is the story of our lives too. I don't know why I'm got into the religion type part of it, because sometimes I have to give my opinion as a rabbi. If you see my name here, and this is always I'm asked, about my opinion why I converted to Christianity, and the only answer I have to give because they have a nice faith. But that's people don't know how to shouldn't. I'm glad it is only one E. But still they call it rabbi.
That's so funny.
Yes, but that's how they read it, rabbi. How they spell it. This is, but this is where I'm always asked. Sometimes it is good for me at the airports, but sometimes,
I would like to agree with Rateb in that the unity between Western Christians and Palestinian Christians has to be linked to Christian unity in general. I have heard evangelical type people with evangelical leanings, I don't know what church they actually belong to, but I have heard them speak of Roman Catholics and Orthodox, and they didn't even know about the Melkites, the Greek Catholics, but I've heard them speak of Catholics and Orthodox as belonging to some kind of distortion of Christianity. These folks are still fighting the Protestant Reformation, and we really need to move beyond that, seriously.
It is true, and this is what affecting us because you go to any church because that's our mission, to speak at churches, and always you have people are with you and people against you, and always the pastors are concerned what to do, and you go as being to the chair for Muslim Christians coalition. You go to any mosque, they are all united for their own things, and that's something we need to learn. And you go to Jewish, the same thing. They fight between each other, but when it comes to own religion, they are united. And Christians, we have a problem, in what we do, and we need to change that. And hopefully, always we talk about Christian unity because that will help in bringing peace, in the Holy Land if we that become united, not to be afraid. We need to speak out, and that's something we need to do it. And always we are, because we don't fight and we separate the politics from religion. Always we are, defending ourselves. Always we don't come forward to say what we want to say, and that's something. Christian has to change and have to be outspoken. They have to say their mind in order to bring peace in the Holy Land. If we keep claiming Jerusalem is part of us and we have stake into Jerusalem, and this is what the book all about, then the other Jewish will stand. I'm saying that because over 20 years ago, when Father was talking about when they were advocate for Jerusalem, and they were Palestinian, versus Jewish at that time. Now it's completely different. Jewish and Palestinians are pro-peace, are for Palestine. And the ones who are not pro-peace are against us. The things changed. You look at a lot of things happening like PBS, they are saying now, who's leading that? They are the Jewish leading it, not the Arabs, not the Palestinians. They are the one leading that. Now we are following them, and that's good. But that's where the changes is going to happen from within the Israeli Jewish community. This is the only way to win the fight. Because, if you go there every year, I take young people from Palestinian origin. From all over the world, to educate them about their roots, and to understand that how they can be peacemakers too. We don't go there to let them be against anybody, and this is where we need to think about as Christians, we understand that we need to be vocal, outspoken, and to bring the peace to the area, and to start not to be afraid. And this is where I learned, when Father Drew and I were on the entourage of John Paul II in his pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and Father Drew, who was the catalyst with all the bishop and cardinal, which he transformed them from being just Catholics to pro-Palestinians, and we can attest to that, where they have no clue about who are the Palestinians. When you have somebody saying, what the difference between the Palestinian and the Christians in Palestine, the Palestinian Christian and the Palestinian. There's no difference, just the faith. It's like here in this room we have Muslim Christians, and I don't know if we have Jews, but we have Christians from different denominations, and we have Muslims, and we all agree on peace and justice. If you have the heart and the mind, then you will not accept what's going on there. And this is where we need to change it.
Speaking of the heart and the mind, one thing that has struck me in my own pitiful advocacy efforts over the last 10 or 12 years is there is no significant, well-funded lobbying presence in Washington on the part of the churches and the church organizations that believe strongly in justice for the Palestinians. There's nothing comparable to AIPAC on the Zionist side. There's nothing comparable to CUFI, Christians United for Israel, John Hagee's organization. So the members of Congress are not listening much to us because they're not getting funding for their campaigns from us. And we don't have any money to speak of. You know, the Protestant churches at least, you know, yeah, they send some letters, 3 or 4 letters a year to the members of Congress decrying the occupation or what's happening in Gaza. But that's it. It just kind of falls flat. And what do the three of you have to say about that, the need for more significant and really existential lobbying in Washington?
Well, I think we need to clean the money out of politics. I mean, that's a problem. But you're quite right. That settles it. I mean, the embassy went to Jerusalem because 3 Jewish billionaires agreed to raise $100 million for that cause, and Ms. Dadelson put down $30 million the Thursday before the move was announced. So you're right, it's about the money, but I think the money's a problem. I don't know whether it's a question of, do you contribute to that kind of degradation of the politics, or do you find other ways to move ahead that are less corrupting?
Would it be more adequate, more effective rather, to fight fire with fire, to try to raise comparable amounts of money, to have a strong lobbying presence?
Well, I think fidelity is very important for the Christian communities. Fidelity to the gospel and to its call for peace. Effectiveness is not short-term effectiveness is not only what we're interested in, but we do certainly need to find alternatives to the kind of voice their money gives them, and really addressing that question of money and politics, I think, is something you call us now to do.
Would money enough, or is it because it was approved by Trump? I mean, the money enough would not have been enough. It was approved by the government.
Well, the money.
If the government will not approve it, they would not have value.
The money is not coming from the government. Money coming from individuals too.
Yes,
You know,
But the money went to the Republican Party, so the president wouldn't be accused of a crime.
Sorry?
Yeah, if the money had gone directly to the president or the White House, it would have been a crime. It would have been a bribery. But they sent it to the Republican Party. That's why it can't be classified as a bribe.
Trump that approved.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Maureen?
You know, I think some of I think the money, yes, has been an issue, but it's too easy an excuse for us. And if you look at the statistics now on Americans and how they're viewing the issues, they are in fact being moved to more consideration and concern about the Palestinians. What we're not doing is enough organizing at the local level to talk to members of Congress. And I think that's part of and people coming back from trips, you're right, for years it was pretty starry-eyed. And part of it is making sure that when people go, they really do see the full context of what's going on there, not just visit the holy sites, and as important as they are. So I feel as if we're challenged to do more ourselves to take advantage of some of the changes that are happening out there with the young people, et cetera, because there are some real changes. One concern, what is happening about the municipal tax in Jerusalem? I mean, that was so interesting. The minute they closed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right, Netanyahu came in and had to do something, but we know what normally happens then is no one hears what's going on now, and it comes back and it's disastrous.
Well, there's some background information if you read enough stories, and that is that this was a feud between the mayor and the minister of finance. The Israeli government, the Vatican negotiated with the Israeli government over these things for years. There's no signed agreement, but they got the message that you don't directly tax churches. I think there's some ambiguity, not on the part of the Catholics, but perhaps others, about what is church property that's taxable and not untaxable. But the Israeli government was paying 700 million shekels a year to the municipality for lost taxation, and that there's only one story I found that in. But so sometimes the churches get hit because it's opportunistic on the part of local politicians, and I think that's what happens. I don't think there's been any formal settlement, because just as with the settlement with the church, even though it was negotiated over several years, the Israeli government never wants to get tied down. You know, they're not signed the fundamental agreement after 25 years, so it doesn't like to be tied by agreements, but it sees the necessity of exempting churches. And what most of the press didn't catch was that it was really an internal Israeli dispute that had generated this problem.
Correct me if I am wrong about the agreement between the Vatican and the Israelis not signed till now, because the Vatican at one point they said, okay, we'll give you taxes, but we'll have the rights for all the holy places, and Israel doesn't want that, you know, to have control, give the Vatican control over the holy places.
Yeah, at one point when Patriarch Twal was patriarch, they tried to say, well, we'll ratify, because they've signed and published the fundamental agreement. They've not ratified in Knesset. No government has ever presented to the Knesset for consideration. So, but the quid pro quo was, we won't take over we'll give you the holy. If we ratify the treaty, then you give up basically the minor holy places, not the Holy Sepulchre or the Nativity, but the rest of them, to turn them into national parks and tourist sites, and the church refused to do that.
All right, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Just to let everybody online know as well, you can learn more about the book at hcef.org, and more about the organization, Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation. For everybody here, there's some flyers that you can get afterwards. And everybody, you can buy the book online as well. And of course, don't forget Right Alert. Is that right?
Thank you, yes.
Yes. So yeah, thank you so much for coming here and speaking about this very important topic. We look forward to having you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming.